She buried her husband 7 years ago, but years later she sees him having dinner on a cruise ship while she works. What would you do? Lies, betrayals, and she didn't even imagine she was involved in it. But it was too late and her life was already at risk.
Like a fog hiding more than it exposed, the clinking of crystal glasses and the hum of luxury swept across the diner. Calm and chilly, the dark mirror outside the water stretched eternally under the moon. Her tray balanced, grim professional, eyes focused to detect the smallest change in the air. Clara ghosted between tables. She was skilled at this acting. She had 7 years to study. Every thread of her uniform was a reminder that this was not her life, hence she wore it like a costume. Not exactly. Her life had finished the night she received the call. The plane had gone down. None lived. No remains. Just a headline, a condolence package, and a closed casket interred in damp soil. She had wept, yelled, agreed, or at least attempted to. She'd consumed the sorrow like salt water, and it had hardened at the borders into something unpleasant. Table 17, her supervisor shouted, breaking the evening's deadening cadence. The tray in her hands remained stable when Clara pivoted. Near the back window, table 17 sat where the glass curved like the world's edge. Half lit by candles, a man sat alone. The flicker highlighted the angular sharpness of his jaw. His collar was sharp, his outfit charcoal black, and his watch ridiculously pricey. He radiated stillness like gravity. People drifted away from him unknowingly. Her breath caught as she came closer. Not at all. That was impossible. The tray in her hand shook, the glasses making a frantic rattling. Her heart raced, then pounded. She blinked 1 time, 2 times. The guy, though, stayed. He appeared older, sharper in some way. His hair was darker than she recalled, his beard cut in a manner he had never used. Yet the eyes, those eyes had seen her candlelight undress, had gazed at her over vows and tears and muttered future intentions. He raised his gaze. Their gazes crossed. The world ceased for 1 unattainable second. He then grinned nicely. No acknowledgement. Clara's hand gripped the tray. Her jaw muscles tensed till she could sense the strain behind her eyelids. She had seen them drop his casket, had stood in the rain while dirt thudded against the wood. She had wept over a vacant box. Her fingers trembled as she poured the drink. "Anything else, sir?" she inquired, her voice almost a whisper. He gazed at her, eyes roving over her features, hanging for a trifle too long. Something behind his gaze flickered. Curiosity? Concern? Not at all. Thanks. It was his vocalization, the precise tone of his voice, the inflection, the pitch. Clara left before she could fall. She hardly got to the kitchen before the tray crashed to the ground. A voice yelled. Hands seized her shoulders, but suddenly everything was beneath water, far away, dampened. Her heart was a drum, and the beat was off. Clara lay in the crew quarters that night gazing up at the ceiling, the bunk above her creaking under someone's weight change. Her flatmate dozed off quietly, like a whisper barely below hearing. The ship's hum was unrelenting. Clara could only consider him, though. Dan, her spouse, the guy she interred, living. She started to observe him. Not obviously, not at this time. Every spare moment, though, she followed his ship movements. Now he went by Elias Vane, a name oozing with ancient wealth and hidden motives. Investor, billionaire, shipping tycoon, mysterious hermit. Every one of the travelers murmured about him. Few people actually knew who he was, only that for the following 10 days he had booked the most exclusive suite aboard the ship. He was by himself, no relatives, no helpers. Clara's head whirled with options. Had he staged his death? For what reason? Why had he not returned to her? Had he been in difficulty? Was this, after all, a case of mistaken identity? Every night, though, she found herself recalling the little personal details, the scar on his left wrist from when he broke a bottle as a kid, the way he always tapped his fingers twice while he was thinking, the rhythm of his breath as he slept. She was aware. It was he. He was untruthful. The following evening, she wrote him a note in his suite. No sign, handwritten on ship stationery. Just 1 line reads, 7 years is a long time to stay dead. Her pulse pounding in her throat, she pushed it under his door and left. She anticipated quiet, perhaps misunderstanding. What she received was a reaction. The next morning, hidden away in her locker was a folded sheet of paper. Unnamed, some graves are better left untouched. Her blood flowed icy. This was intentional. He was aware. The storm struck on the 4th day. Walls like waves, wind like howling. The luxury cruise became a floating prison, as the water pounded it with unrelenting rage. Passengers were told to remain in their rooms. Staff members fought to keep control. Clara, however, moved like a shadow the whole time, her gaze fixed on the guy who had changed her past. Elias Daniel stayed calm, unaffected by fear. Coat flapping in the breeze, he stood on the top deck balcony, as though to greet the mayhem. Clara trailed him. "Why?" she asked, almost losing her voice to the storm. The wind pressed his hair against his head as he turned slowly. For a brief while, something nearly like melancholy flitted across his face. "Clara," he murmured gently. The way he said her name, as if it were still holy, she felt like screaming. "Weep." "Hit him." "Rather," she said. "You were dead. You abandoned me. I had no option." "Nonsense." He moved nearer. Flashing lightning lit the water underneath. He claimed, "They were going to kill us both. I struck a bargain." "With whom?" He was unsure. "I cannot say. Not present. Not yet." She looked at him, her heart split between want and fury. "You ought to have informed me. I had to go away. So now you return?" He remained silent, simply turned and left. Someone attempted to murder her that night. She discovered the cut brake lines on her maintenance cart. A faulty overhead light almost toppled and crushed her. The message was obvious: cease digging. Clara, though, had never been one to flee from ghosts. Stealing time between shifts to sift through passenger records, cross-reference manifests, and eavesdrop on elite discussions, she started her own inquiry. Elias Vane was a ghost created from ashes, not only a new persona, she discovered. Beyond the date of his alleged death, Daniel Morgan had no documented history, no prints, no accounts in banks, not a thing. But she also picked up something different. 2 months prior to the accident, Daniel had gotten a substantial transfer, millions, into a numbered Zurich account. Who sent it? A shell company linked to a pharmaceutical behemoth, engaged in secret bioresearch. As she put it together, Clara's hand shook. He had not only departed, someone had purchased him, alternatively blackmailed. 6th day, Clara faced him once more. This time in his suite, she employed a taken staff keycard, waited till he was alone. Glass, chrome, shadows made the room a paradise of frigid beauty. "Tell me what they made you do," she replied, shutting the door. Sitting at the desk, he was entering data into a locked laptop. His eyes were haunted when he turned. "They claimed they would kill you." "Who?" He remained silent. Clara moved ahead. "Did you murder for them?" Quiet. It was too long of a break. And during that break, something within her shattered. "You are not the guy I loved." He spoke softly. "Not at all. I am not." 7 years ago he passed away. The rain had altered the city. More subdued, more personal. A curtain drawn across something private. Clara now went through the streets with accuracy. Every curve, every alley selected for what it exposed and what it hid. Daniel trailed at a distance, merging into the damp blur of people. Narrow Rue de la Forge lay between 2 apartment buildings with shuttered windows and graffiti that resembled messages, if you knew how to read them. Heart racing, hands buried in her coat pockets, she stood at the junction. Nearby, an automobile engine idled, a cab with fogged windows. The door swung open. A guy emerged, 50s late, dressed smartly, without an umbrella. Though his eyes were dry, his hair was stuck to his brow, chilly, regulated. He pointed to the rear seat. Clara wavered. Under the shadow of a bus shelter, Daniel was watching from across the street. A single nod, that's all she gave him. She entered. The door closed. The cab drove off. At first, the guy remained silent. He didn't have to. Clara sensed the change in mood. The inside of the automobile was too quiet. At last he remarked, "I am the cause Daniel is still alive." Clara gazed at him. "Then you owe me more than a ride." He hardly grinned. "Not at all. Still, I owe him a warning." She remained. He went on. "The leak shook more than you anticipated. Now there are fractures. Within Orbiotech, within the agency, ancient alliances crumbling, fresh ones developing. But they don't seek visibility. They seek consolidation." She said, "What does that mean?" "It means," he continued slowly, "that you're not just running from them anymore. You are going towards something they desire." Clara's skin froze. "They'll let you go to Krakow," he remarked. "They'll even assist you. But not for fairness, not for veracity. to control. Clara felt the weight of his words settle like rock. Then why tell me to be careful? For the first time, he looked into her eyes, and in that 1 second, she noticed it, the weariness, the remnant of decisions taken long before. Once you push that last button, you don't get to choose who catches the pieces. The vehicle slowed, came to a halt. Clara gazed out the window. They were close to the train station. Nobody nearby. He swung the door open. I went this far. Clara left, still raining, chilly, acutely. He uttered one last thing before the door closed. Next time someone offers you help, inquire what they fear you will do without it. The door then shut, and the automobile disappeared into the night. Moments later, silent and drenched, Daniel showed up. Clara remained silent. She simply gave him the second phone, the one she had not mentioned to him, the one that had begun vibrating once more in her pocket. 3 words appear on the screen. You have already been compromised. Clara, gazing down at those words, understood the game had changed once more. Whatever followed, they were unprepared for it. That lingered in the air for some time. Clara stood, opened the bathroom door, and came back with a damp cloth. Crouching next to him, she softly wiped the dirt from his neck and the dried blood from his cheek. He remained still, watched her just as he wasn't convinced she was genuine. She said, I meant what I said. We complete this. Daniel's lips twitched in what could have been a grin. Or maybe just pain. You know what that implies, right? Clara agreed. Sure, we stay with it. Groaning, Daniel sat up slowly. They still lack one drop point. A Krakow-based autonomous server farm, air-gapped, not connected to the grid. To prevent it, they would require physical access. We post from there. Complete leak. All. Clara scowled. That's days off. I understand. We will not go that far. His voice was quiet as he leaned forward with elbows on his knees. Unless we act unexpectedly. Clara was familiar with that gaze in his eye, knew it far too well. He was no longer thinking like a survivor. He was thinking like someone prepared to destroy the whole system with himself still within. What do you mean? He gazed up at her, his face reflecting something constant and hazardous. We become public. She opened and closed her eyes. That is suicide. No, he responded. It's insurance. We do a partial release. Titles, several papers, sufficient to create noise, sufficient to render their deaths impossible, without attracting more notice. What about the others? Limping to the desk, Daniel stood carefully and removed the transmitter from Clara's bag, placing it down like a loaded gun. Until Krakow, that sticks with us. That's the death switch. She looked at it. What if they capture us before we arrive? Daniel looked at her. We then go down live. The idea turned her stomach, yet he was correct. The adversary flourished in silence. Their only defense was exposure. And if they didn't respond quickly, Marla would reconsider, or someone else above would completely overrule her. Clara stared out across the city from the window. The streets below were calm. Pedestrians walked oblivious to what simmered under their feet. She speculated about their thoughts should they know. Should they view the papers, the images, the messages, the equations? Would they mind? Would it be significant? She looked back to Daniel. All right, let's get it done. The partial leak had gone live by daybreak. Heart racing, Clara saw it develop in real time. Unidentified servers, phantom accounts, whispers drifting through dark areas of the internet, biotech executive names, timelines of events recorded, coded accounts of experiments run overseas, sufficient to ignite boardrooms and black ops initiatives all over half the planet, but only the tip of the iceberg. They remained. Time went by. Then the planet began to respond. A tiny but well-known science blog published a piece called What is Project Harbor? A tweet from an independent journalist read, if this leak is real, it's the biggest bioethical scandal of the last 50 years. Then once more quiet. Clara understood what that signified. The storms I was rotating in their direction. Hands folded, face drawn. Daniel sat on the bed's edge. They'll come for us fast now. Clara agreed. We then remain ahead of them. He examined her closely. You should also know something else. Suddenly icy, she looked at him. What? I didn't only disclose the documents to reporters. What do you mean by that? Reaching into his jacket, he took out a second transmitter. Less, easier. I signaled an old Orbiotech insider, someone who might yet be moral. Getting to Krakow will require assistance. Clara looked at the gadget, her chest seething with rage. You contacted those attempting to murder us? Daniel remained unflinching. Should he reply, we will know his side. What if he doesn't? Then we will also know that. She felt like screaming, "Toss something, run." She sat down and shut her eyes instead. The conflict was still ongoing. It was only starting. The rain fell unannounced. 1 minute, the Marseille sky was its typical chalky gray. A chilly downpour fell in sheets the following, soaking the streets, hiding footsteps, and erasing traces. Watching the water flow over the cobblestones like a sluggish flood, Clara stood under the umbrella of a shuttered bakery. Once inside her pocket, her phone buzzed. A burner, new, clean, never connected to her name. A single note, 19 minutes, Rue de la Forge. By myself, no one sends, no background, but she understood the significance. She went back to the hostel and discreetly entered the room. Daniel, his face tense with expectation, was at the window gazing down on the street. Since the leak went public, he had not slept. She had not either. Their wits stretched thin, and their nerves too raw. They now spoke less. Words drained energy they lacked. Clara's intervention caused him to turn right away. She held up the phone. They responded. Though his face remained unchanged, Daniel's posture did straighten somewhat. "Where?" she informed him. He hesitated for just a second. "I will accompany you." Clara said no. "They wanted me by myself." "You believe that matters," he remarked. "You believe they'll let you walk away if it goes wrong?" Her voice was calm as she gazed at him. "Should I not go? Our sole lead vanishes. We miss the opportunity to reach Krakow. We lose everything." Daniel moved closer to her. Rain poured from his sleeve where he had been resting against the sill. "Then we both leave. I'll keep out of view," she agreed. It was the most compromise either of them could manage. 5 minutes later they departed. Though his head hung a little, his eyes were awake and locked on Marla with a sort of disdain that suggested he would rather die than break. Marla's stance was excellent as always, but Clara saw something different now: weariness. A crack in the armor, calm yet passionate. Her voice was keen enough to cut through any falsehood. Marla remarked, "You're wasting time. You know they won't stop until they have it. You believe it was smart to conceal it with her? She's in over her head." Daniel was silent. His silence was defiance. Perhaps acceptance instead. Marla moved closer and bent down to his level. "You believe she will live through this?" "Daniel, she's a waitress. A mourning widow who fell into a conflict she cannot even call." Clara's stomach turned. Then the third voice, closer now, masculine, clipped, with a slight European accent. "If he won't give it to us, we find her." "Easy." Sighing, Marla stood and looked at the door. Clara remained still, did not breathe, but it was already too late. Marla responded gently, "I know you're there." "Quiet, then. Come in, Clara." Her name lingered in the air like a sentence. Clara moved ahead. Her heart seemed to be about to burst. Eyes roving, she carefully entered the room. 2 armed guys against the back wall. 1 desk, no windows, a tray of tools on a rolling cart made for a minimalist setting. No way out. Seeing her made Daniel's head up a little. His face showed pain and relief clashing. Marla remained expressionless. "I suppose you brought it, Dad. I suppose you brought it." Clara remained silent. Marla agreed. "Sure you did. You would not be here otherwise." Clara looked at Daniel. "You okay? Are you okay?" He nodded slightly and sadly. Arms crossed, the accented guy moved forward. "Let's keep this straightforward. You give us the transmitter. We let him walk. You hold on to it. He passes away. No addresses, no second opportunities." Clara's heart throbbed in her ears. "Why not just grab it and murder us both? Why not just take it and kill us both?" Marla responded, "We don't know whether you've copied. Back up. Dead man switches. Taking it by force puts everything live, hence we run the risk." Daniel chuckled bitterly and softly. "Clara, you believe they value the truth? All they want is time to bury it deeper." Clara stepped closer to him. Beyond Marla, past the guy. She could now see Daniel more clearly. Though his eyes were calm, his wrists were damaged. They had something unspoken. "Don't let them have it." Clara looked back at Marla. "You brought me here for what reason? Why did you bring me here?" Marla turned her head. "Clara, I'm weary. To be honest, I am rather amazed. You made it. You took the path. You chose things I didn't expect you to." "I don't mean to kill you," Clara remarked, "but you will. Should I not provide it to you?" Marla was silent. The quiet validated everything. Clara cautiously dug into her purse. Fingers grazed the transmitter. She took out a phone. She raised it. "This is live," she said falsely. "One touch, and the whole thing goes public." The guy became tense. Marla did not. He said, "You're bluffing." Clara gazed at Marla. Am I? Marla hesitated for the first time. Seconds felt like hours. Then she put up her hand. "Let him go." The guy stayed still. I said, Marla shouted again, her voice now more forceful. Let him go. Daniel's bindings were unfastened. Breathing heavily, he sagged forward. Clara went to his side and assisted him to his feet. The man spoke again, this time more angrily. You are wrong. Marla responded, eyes fixed on Clara. No, I am postponing a conflict. They slowly exited the room. Nobody attempted to prevent them. Not so far. The night air outside struck them like a wave. Clara guided Daniel into the alley behind the building, back toward the quiet streets, his arm draped over her shoulders. Neither talked until 3 blocks away. Then Daniel said softly, You had the transmitter? Clara agreed. I still do. Was it alive? No. He chuckled, genuine yet feeble. You lied. You did too. As they strolled, he relied on her. Now what? Clara stared forward, eyes tough. We complete it. For the first hour, they remained silent. Their movements were uneven. Daniel limped and Clara kept one arm around his back, guiding him through alleys and side streets like a nurse in a war zone. The quiet between them was not empty. It was full with fatigue, adrenaline, and the great weight of unspoken ideas. They took refuge at a hostel far from the center, one of those nameless places where the receptionist didn't care to look at their IDs too closely, where the sheets were clean enough and the walls thick enough to shut the outside world for a few precious hours. Daniel fell onto the bed inside the room without removing his shoes. Clara closed the door, bolted it, and then for good measure drew the desk in front of it. Only then did she let herself to breathe out. The air was old. Her throat was parched. Carrying more than simply weight made her muscles sore. Trying to make sense of what had just occurred, what was still ongoing, she sat at the edge of the bed gazing at the floor. Daniel was the first to break the quiet. He spoke with a rasp. I assumed she would murder us. Clara ignored him. She still could. Wincing, he shifted his weight and nodded slowly. Why not run? She turned her head just enough to catch his gaze. Because I was weary of seeing people vanish. Without thinking, she dashed back. The cafe was a madhouse. Behind the counter, the man was slumped against the wall with blood pooling under his shoulder. Crawling away on hands and knees was a second guy, perhaps a tourist or just unfortunate. Coughing, eyes wide, scorched, Renault lay on the floor. Daniel was absent, not among the injured, not among the deceased. Clara's thoughts split into jagged shards. Though her feet wouldn't budge, her instincts yelled at her to flee. She gazed at Renault. Where's he? Where's he? Choking, he shook his head. They took him off the field. Who? Who is it? No response. She didn't wait for one. She sprinted, down the alleyway, across the street, adrenaline clouding her sight. Daniel had into a trap, and they had captured him living. That meant they still required him. That indicated he still had time. She still possessed the transmitter. She ran till the sun was behind the structures, and her lungs ached with the reality. Clara had no recollection of her running duration. Perhaps minutes. 30 minutes. Time had become meaningless, twisted out of form by the great power of panic and doubt. She stopped only when her legs could no more support her. Breathless and with shaking hands, she fell onto a bench in a little shaded park on the far side of the ancient harbor. Her thoughts raced too quickly to capture. Daniel had left. The meeting had been tainted. Someone had known precisely when and where they would be. It had not been arbitrary. It had not been careless. It was precise, planned. Now she was genuinely alone in a city she didn't know, clutching the one knowledge everyone seemed ready to kill for. She looked at the bag once again. Still there. At the bottom, wrapped tightly in a scarf, the transmitter was caught between the artificial liner she'd sewed in during their last night on the ship. Daniel's insistence on a habit, preparation, nervousness, care. She had termed it too much. Now, it seemed as though she was still alive just for this. She required cover, a place to contemplate, to reposition, strategize, and slow down. Rising on shaky legs, she went till she saw a tiny hostel hidden between 2 dilapidated apartment complexes. The sort of location that didn't care if you paid in cash and didn't query. She signed in using a name she hadn't used since university. No lift, 3rd floor room. The walls were thin, the bed sagging, the air stale. It was peaceful, and for now that was sufficient. She stayed awake. She walked back and forth, looked at the window, listened for hallway footsteps. Every noise caused her back to tighten. Every sound drove her automatically for the kitchen knife she had taken from the hostel's shared area. She turned her phone off but charged it. She looked at the transmission, as though it could explode. Her thoughts ran the scene again and again all the time. The coffee shop, the detonation, Daniel's vacant chair, Renault's eyes empty dread. Had they taken Daniel, he was alive. At the moment, that also implied they still thought he had something required. Perhaps the master key, perhaps the backup supply, perhaps access to a server she was unaware of. They may put him through agony, give him drugs, make him hate her, or even worse, give the impression he had never lived. She departed the hostel around dawn, going cautiously, hoodie zipped up despite the warm air, large sunglasses, hat pulled low. First, she visited the cafe's remains. It was previously taped off with yellow. Light police presence. Nobody looks at it more than a fleeting glance. Another violent act in a world already overrun with them. She turned and vanished back into the city after watching from a distance for a long time. She visited internet cafes under many aliases, looked for neighborhood gossip, current events, social networking, footage from surveillance. The event, however, had not been publicized. No word of an explosion, no comments. Not so much as a tweet, which validated what she had already thought. The whole thing had been confined, cleaned clean by those experts in erasing facts before they ever reached the public. She at last turned on her phone back in her room, wiped in Anonymous, a burner. She used an encrypted messaging software routed across 6 servers, one of Daniel's emergency contacts. She wrote 2 words. He's gone. She didn't anticipate a response. 6 minutes later, she received one. They're transferring him tonight. That was everything it stated. No sign, no verification, only a window. Clara looked over the note and then typed reply. Where? No answer. She made another attempt. Where? Still no results. She let out a scream, slammed the wall with the phone, then picked it up, panting, and sat on the ground trembling. If they were relocating him, she would have fewer than 12 hours to learn where. 12 hours or less to act. Less than 12 hours before everything fell into a hush she would be unable to shatter. She pulled out the transmitter, looked at it, and reached back into her bag. She could let everything go now. Everything. Make them act. But should she, they could quickly kill Daniel. They could kill her. Or, even worse, they could disappear and begin again somewhere else, smarter, more vicious, quicker. She no longer knew what was correct. All she knew was that she had to act. She went back to the port at dusk. She roamed, heard, observed. Then, right before the sun set behind the structures, she spotted him. Renault, or someone with his face, walking quickly and talking into a tiny earpiece. His backpack had been swapped for a more streamlined satchel. He no longer appeared hurt, not even a limp. If he had been caught in the explosion, it hadn't left a mark. Clara came next, with caution. 3 city blocks. After that 4. He went inside a side entrance of a building marked just with a code. She remained, numbered, slipped in behind a delivery team. Inside, reinforced doors, fluorescent lights, tight corridors. She was unflinching. She climbed the stairs, hesitated, heard, then shifted. She heard it on the 3rd floor, all the way down the corridor. One voice, weak, Daniel's, then a different voice, woman, keen, Marlia. Behind her eyes, Clara's pulse raced. She was present. Daniel was still living. She moved ahead. No running, not concealing, simply advancing toward the noise. Whatever followed next would be her decision. Every stride made the corridor appear to shrink around her, walls throbbing with the beat of her pulse. Silent, sterile, the building's air seemed dense with the sort of tension that clings to concealed items. Sweat coated Clara's palms, and her breath was under control. She heard them at the far end of the corridor behind a reinforced steel door, muffled voices rising and falling in sharp bursts. Daniel was one. The other was Marla's. The 3rd voice, quieter, masculine, unknown, was more difficult to identify, but his presence made her skin crawl. She had no strategy, no arms, no way out. Her bag's transmitter and the strong conviction that turning back signified more than only failure. It signified defeat. She was not prepared to give up. Carefully on the industrial carpet, she crept forward. The door was somewhat open, just enough to enable her discern the silhouette of Daniel's body, hands tied to the arms of a metal chair. A thin gash over his cheekbone, blood dried at the edge. Half unbuttoned, his shirt exposed electrodes taped to his chest. Not enough to die, just enough to exhaust him. He unzipped it and rifled through. stopped. Clara saw his forehead crease. "This is what? What is this?" he said, removing the transmitter. Clara's lips became parched. A voice sliced through the din before she could respond. "It belongs to me." Daniel left the line. Everyone spun around. The guard became rigid. Hand out. Daniel moved quietly ahead. "She must have taken it up with my belongings. I work at the French consulate. Diplomatic technology. Review your list." He said it so persuasively that Clara nearly accepted it. The guard seemed unsure. "Examined the list. Daniel must have created something." The guard nodded after a beat, gave back the bag. They were waved past. Clara faced Daniel outside on the dock. "You lied." He grinned weakly. Better than the other option. She remained silent. They continued on foot. Behind them, the ship loomed in the early mist, silent, huge and ghost-filled. The sun over Marseille seemed antiseptic, harsh in a way that reminded Clara of interrogation lamps and sterile gloves, rather than warmth or freedom. The open air was exposed, not comforting. Every passerby a possible observer. Every seagull's cry a distraction hiding footsteps behind them. The pier lay before them like a stage without curtains, blending with the throng of disembarking passengers. She went quickly but without urgency. Now her clothing was civilian simple. Her bag seemed heavier than it should. Its weight came not from the inside transmitter, but from the awareness of what it carried. What they had taken, what they had endured to defend. Daniel walked beside her, slightly behind, allowing her to take the lead. He trusted her now. Or at least, he trusted her more than he did himself. Clara could sense the change, even if she wasn't sure when it occurred. His shoulders relaxed under her control. The way he now looked to her if something seemed wrong. He still moved with the measured paranoia of someone who had spent too long on the run, but there was something else beneath his silent attention. Tiredness, a bone-deep weariness that no amount of rest could remedy. Cutting down narrow side alleys where the buildings leaned in close, and the scent of salt gave way to warm bread and engine oil. They didn't speak until they were blocks away from the dock. The city throbbed with its normal beat, lively and unconcerned for their tragedy. How commonplace things was almost offensive. Clara despised it. Every grinning tourist, every honking automobile, every barista chuckling behind a counter. It all seemed like a fantasy someone else was experiencing. At last Daniel spoke. "It's 2 more streets ahead. Turn left at the florist." The night before, they had memorized the path. Speaking, he ignored her as his gaze continued to search for tails, patterns, anything that didn't fit. Without saying, Clara nodded. Since the time they disembarked, her heart had been racing. She doubted it would ever again. The cafe was precisely what she anticipated from a meeting place selected by someone like Daniel. Old, simple, with an awning worn by years of sunlight and salt. Out front, a few little tables sat unoccupied. Inside, one man behind the counter uninterested. A radio broadcast something crackling in French. They came in without thinking, sat at the far corner table, ordered no food. The door opened once more at precisely 11:08. The individual who came in didn't seem to be a reporter. Clara first observed that. He seemed like someone who moved mail between departments in a government office or worked in archives. Petite, anxious, not shaven. His body made his backpack seem overly large, but when he looked into Daniel's eyes, something sharp passed between them, a spark of awareness and caution. He sat down unannounced, glanced in between them. "You weren't tracked." His voice soft but attentive, his accent local. Daniel declined. "Not that we know of, but that is really meaningless at the moment." The guy agreed. "You are early." "That's great." Clara kept a close eye on him. "You are Renaud." "So you're Renaud?" He looked at her. "You may call me that, indeed." She disliked his phrasing, as though all he was a placeholder, a trick. She, however, remained silent about it. Daniel pushed a little flash drive over the table. "This is a piece, just enough to show what we possess. The rest remains encrypted until the leak goes live." Renaud took it up, ignored it. "You are posting it. You are putting it up?" Daniel replied, "Not yet. Not until we know what we're heading into. We want a regulated burn. Names, laboratories, sites. You have contacts who can shift this without setting off the incorrect alarms. You have contacts who can handle this without setting off the incorrect alarms." Renaud's expression stayed inscrutable. "I have information. I don't run them. I can, however, send it via appropriate methods, silent ones. First academic, after that overseas media, then the monster sustains itself. What if they locate you?" Clara inquired. He grinned faintly. Then they murder me. But they will be too late. That is the sole relevant guideline. Clara did not return the grin. She disliked him. He seemed unstable in some way. Helpful but risky. She looked at Daniel. He remained silent both ways. They planned the handoff in minutes. See once more in 24 hours. Verify the data breaches activity. From there disappear. Fresh identities, fresh continents, the entire game beginning over. Clara was the first to leave the cafe. She walked 10 steps down the alley before realizing anything was amiss. The noise did it. Not a gunfire, not a shout, simply a change in the atmosphere. A quiet that came too quickly. The window of the cafe shattered. Glass fell like a burst of rain. Heart pounding, hands dragging on the ground. Clara fell straight down. People yelled behind her. One yelled. Turning, she noticed smoke gushing out the entrance. Flames, shade, action. Daniel had left. The man wearing the beige blazer. The one Clara had observed from a distance for days. Always by myself. Always looking at his phone. Blood pooled under his skull, slowly oozing through the tile fissures. His eyes, still open, stared blankly at the ceiling. A tiny pistol lay just out of reach of his hand. While building in her throat, Clara stepped back. Daniel knelt cautiously, looked for the pulse he already knew wouldn't be there, and examined the corridor. Nobody. No action. No indication of struggle. He died fast, in an efficient manner. Clara gulped. Why him? Why him? Daniel got up. He belonged to them. One of Marla's. One of Marla's? He was unsure. Someone else's. He might have been rogue, a free agent, monitoring. Someone wanted him quiet either way. She gazed down once more at the guy. The scene had a somewhat disquieting quality. Overly tidy, too precise, no disorder, no indications of a struggle. Just a man, a weapon, and a purpose buried with him. Clara started to experience something other than terror. For the first time since this had begun, she felt observed. They had to go. Right now. Daniel silently consented. Still empty at that hour, they turned, retraced their route along the service corridor, and sneaked into the staff mess hall. Clara leaned against the door and closed it behind them, gasping. Daniel stood opposite her, his eyes continuously searching. Then she mentioned it. We are no longer only goals. He gazed at her. We are liabilities. Anyone still alive on this ship who knows what's coming. They're all in danger. He did not object. They sat quietly, a peculiar sort of weight falling upon them. This was no longer a spy game. It wasn't cloak and dagger. It was carried out. Clean up. Clara came to a conclusion she had not let herself think about until then. Nobody was coming to save them. They had to make themselves too deadly to kill if they were to live. Daniel dug into his coat and brought out a tiny device, another transmitter, unlike the first. He said, this one's off-grid, not trackable. This is our final backup. What is on it? What is on it? All of it. Clara looked at it. So we let it go. Daniel hesitated. Daniel was unsure. Not yet. Doing it now will cause them to sink us before we dock. We hold on. We leave the ship. We then ignite the fuse. She shook her head. It was logical. Hardly. Still, it was their finest. The issue was surviving the ship's departure. The last day played out in slow motion. Guests buzzing with enthusiasm once more. Pretending they hadn't noticed the change in the air during the last 2 days, the ship started preparing for docking. Luggage filled the hallways. Staff conducted last checks. Somewhere behind the curtain, though, shadows moved purposefully. Clara went back to work. On uniform, face blank, hands calm. She gave coffee to those unaware. They were floating in the midst of a cover-up. Smiled at travelers who would never suspect someone had died 2 decks below throughout the night. She continued looking toward the cameras all the time, seeing them see her. Daniel remained concealed. Too risky for him to be visible today. Marla had disappeared once more, but Clara sensed her presence all around. In the crew's rigidity, in the additional security waiting by the exits, in the hidden looks shared between people not quite strangers. She got another note around lunchtime. An unseen hand slipped this one into her apron pocket. They are aware. A pair of words, no punctuation marks. Without saying anything, Clara folded it and went on working. An announcement at 1400 hours stated that early disembarkation would start at 7:30 the next morning. Clara understood that signaled the closing window. Less than 18 hours remained to leave the spacecraft and extract the data unimpeded. With each clock tick, the tension crushed more and more against her chest. They gathered in the former cargo bay that night. The place was gloomy, neglected, cluttered with metal scaffolding and boxes. While Daniel sketched their strategy, Clara leaned against one of the support beams. He stated, "We go separately. Various exits. Should one of us be halted, the other continues. The transmitter. What about it? What about the transmitter? Sent. You bear it." She opened her eyes. Why me? Why me? You fit in more since you are not marked as I am. It was more than that. She noticed it in his gaze. He didn't think to leave the ship. He was giving her the last piece, as he had already agreed to the price. But she was not prepared to let him go once more. Not in that way. Not without a struggle. They contended, not with high voices but with intensity. Out of desperation, two individuals on a bridge already collapsing attempting to move a boulder between them. Ultimately, Clara disagreed. She did take the gadget though. That night she did not sleep. The ocean was too still, the silence too deafening. Chaos came back at morning. Workers at the dock yelling, crew members in a rush, unaware that some of them had already become footnotes in someone else's conflict. Guests with cameras and baggage thronged the gangway, all eager to get back to the world. Clara, now dressed in civilian attire, easy, not noteworthy. A shoulder bag hung across her breast held the transmitter fastened within, tucked between her passport and a half-read book. Slow yet deliberate, she followed the throng. Daniel was nowhere to be found. That was the strategy. Seeing the first checkpoint made her breath catch. 3 security guards, 2 using radios, 1 bag scanning. She made herself keep walking, keep it casual, keep cool. The line shifted, 2 persons in front of her, then only 1. Heart racing, she moved forward. Bag, said the cop. She gave it up. He agreed. For a few while, they simply sat side by side. 2 individuals gazing into the eye of something they could no longer outrun. Clara got a text later that night. No title, only an envelope slipped under her door. Within 1 piece of paper, you believe he's giving you the complete tale. You believe he is giving you the complete narrative? No sign, no directions, not a problem. But more than any explicit violence, it shook her. It was the sort of inquiry that made her ask whether the ground under her had always been shaky, and she had only just started to sense the swing. She faced Daniel right away. Why would somebody email me this? Why would anyone send this to me? He gazed at it, unreadable. Marla, she could have said it to my face. She's attempting to make me oppose you. Daniel appeared weary. Perhaps. Or perhaps someone else aboard this ship is not on her team. Clara had not considered that option. Now that she had, she could not dismiss it. Who else was aware? How many passengers aboard this ship were playing their own game? How many of the guests in linen suits and phony laughing had blood on their hands? She started to watch once more, observing all. The lady in the red outfit who always requested wine, but never consumed it. The guy who talked to no one, but spent more time looking at his phone. The quiet steward who appeared in every corridor, at every time, unnoticed, always there. The reality was that Clara was no longer the same individual. She no longer lived to fold napkins and serve beverages. She was quietly hunting, not for vengeance, not anymore, rather for clarity, to be in charge, for some little thread of authority in a world that had long since turned her into a pawn. One night she trailed the lady in the red outfit, not far away, just long enough to watch her access a crew-only stairwell, using a pass she shouldn't have possessed. Clara sat tight, measured the time, then crept in behind her. The stairwell went nowhere helpful, only service corridors, door locks. Clara heard a voice, muffled as she passed one of the doorways. A male voice, speaking quickly, anxious. She came near, heard her called, backed off. Then I left. Later she informed Daniel. He remained silent, stared at the ground for a long. What are you not telling me? She eventually inquired. He looked up, and something in his face changed, something unavoidable, weighty. He responded, I returned for another cause. Not only the statistics, not only revenge. Clara felt a tightening in her chest. What? They didn't just threaten you, he continued. They signed you up. She stopped moving. What are you referring to? What are you talking about? They monitored you following my vanishing, watched you, saw you swirl. Then they gave you employment. Not anything formal, Nothing straight, simply motives, a means of escape, improved shifts, a move, a chance you weren't aware was being set up. Clara declined. Not really. I never. You were being groomed, he remarked. Not for fieldwork, to be quiet, for involvement, the sort that doesn't even know it's involved. Her head spun, rising slowly. The burden of it all pulled his stance into something bent and shattered. You did nothing wrong, but they made sure you wouldn't inquire the incorrect questions, just like they did to me, before I understood what I was truly part of. Clara averted her gaze. Her image in the dark window resembled someone else, someone colder, more austere. That night she did not sleep, not even 1 minute. By the last night at sea, the strain had been intolerable. The ship drew near the coast, distant lights of Marseille fading. Docking would take place in the morning, and with it the consequences. Apart from a few night crew, Clara strolled the deck around 3 in the morning by herself. She remembered the file Daniel intended to publish before dawn, remembered Marla, among the rest observing, considered herself, and for the first time since she saw him alive again, she was terrified of what followed next. There was no going back to the world she knew, no iteration of this narrative finished clean. She found Daniel in the front of the ship in the dark, just before daybreak. Under the moon black and gleaming, the sea spread eternally ahead. He had the transmitter in his hand. This is it, he remarked. Are you set? Are you ready? She said. The instant I returned, I was prepared. He gave her the gadget. It's your call, he said. You have lost exactly as much as I have, perhaps more. Clara looked at the tiny item in her hand. It was weightless, and all. Should she push the button, all would alter. Should she not, everything would remain the same and rot from the inside. She gazed up at him. Do you believe in me? Do you believe me? He spoke almost inaudibly. You are, in my opinion, the last remaining individual I can. Then comes the scream. Then came a gunshot from the bottom deck. The gunshot's sound sliced through the stillness like a blade. It was not far away, not muted. It was near, too near. Clara froze, the transmitter still in her palm, her body responding before her mind could. Somewhere below deck, something irreparable had just taken place. Turning to Daniel, she saw his face pallid in the faint morning light, and his eyes already calculating. Neither of them moved for a little second, then both simultaneously. They sprinted, the ship's interior calm save for the distant hum of machinery and the sporadic pressure creak against the hull. Eerily deserted the corridors were. No staff members, no visitors, only quiet, and the recollection of that one acute crack still floating in the air. They got to deck 3, turned left, then right, past the staff quarters and washing rooms, till they got to the back service hallway. There, on the chilly tile floor under a stuttering overhead light, lay a corpse. Silent footsteps, whispered news, and homemade disguises filled the next 24 hours. Clara changed outfits, took keycards, and ran the ship as though she had been born inside it. Daniel remained concealed, traversing the dead zones of the surveillance system. Every second drew the wire they were treading on closer. Scheduled for 2:15 a.m., the phony upload occurred during shift change. 3 floors below the ballroom, they established in an antiquated security substation. The air was old. There was a buzz from the lights. Clara's hands shook as she waited, seeing Daniel type orders into the console. 2:13, 2:15, then came footsteps. Not rushed, intentional. Clara turned, heart in her mouth. Marla Ridge walked into the room as though she owned it. She had not altered much. Older now, yet still keen and calm. Though she wore civilian attire, her posture screamed control in every way. She didn't seem shocked to find them. I was curious when you would stop running, she replied, her voice the same frigid clarity Clara recalled from the intercom. Daniel rose slowly. At any time, you might have killed me. Why hold off? Why delay? Marla smiled weakly. I had to witness what you would do, whom you would believe. Her gaze shifted to Clara. I have to say, she went on, I anticipated better from you. All this time mourning a falsehood. Now you're assisting him in burying many more. Clara moved forward. We're not burying anything. You are. And I am finished allowing you select which truth gets to breathe. Marla turned her head. Does the world desire this reality? Do you believe they are prepared? Governments are lined up to purchase what we produced. Releasing that information starts a conflict. You don't save anyone. Daniel's voice was lifeless. Then perhaps they deserve to know what sort of war they have already been drafted into. For a time, no one moved. Marla then took a tiny gadget out of her coat pocket. I could erase everything right now, she replied. Your backups too. All vanished. Clara remained unflinching. Then why not? So why not? For only a second, Marla's countenance shifted. Questioning. Regrets. Daniel then shifted. Holding out his hand, he moved between them. Allow me to give you something better. What could you possibly give me? What could you possibly give me? He said. Time. Not a leak. Not a transmission. A discussion. Single server. A single reporter. One thread at a time. You assist me in forming it. Manage it. You might also try to set it all on fire and see another person strike the match in your stead. It was crazy. Clara was aware of it. Marla, though, was unsure. There was a protracted stillness. She then turned down the gadget. She said, for now. You won't see it coming, though, should you double-cross me. She left, hands trembling. Daniel sat down carefully. Clara remained silent. There was nothing to talk about. They were not safe. They were not finished. But they had purchased time. Sometimes, though, time is all you have left as a weapon. Morning came back with a pale, washed-out sky and an unnaturally calm water. The storm had passed, but in its place remained a tension stronger than weather, an atmosphere no one could exactly identify, but everyone could sense. Passengers now moved more slowly, more cautiously in their grins, and more quietly in their talks. The atmosphere had changed somehow. Something had snapped. And although many couldn't identify it, Clara sensed it in her bones. The last act hadn't yet begun. The ship had turned into a stage of constraint. Since the fight with Marla, she had not talked to Daniel. Everything had gone still when Marla had stepped out. Too quiet. Eyes remote. Daniel lay motionless, silent. Dazed, Clara had gone back to her room, washed in almost darkness, and then gazed at the ceiling until the wood patterns started to fade into symbols her brain kept attempting to convert. Now, though, there were no obvious solutions, only more questions, and a discomfort that sat between her ribs like a splinter she couldn't access. They had won time, but time, as she fast discovered, was not a consolation. It was a danger. A window for fresh hazards to slither across. Now they had to behave as though nothing had changed, smile at travelers, offer beverages. Underneath, the spacecraft throbbed with secrets, maintain the performance intact. Marla was gone, from at least sight. Clara had no idea what name she had used to board, or what cabin she was staying in. There was no trail, no documentation. That alone made her cold. Someone with no track would weigh too much power, and far too little responsibility. Still, Marla had consented to the arrangement in some way. Piece by piece, a controlled release of the data. Daniel would pick the leaks, Marla would authorize them. A warped collaboration created by shared annihilation. Clara, however, had no faith in her. She also didn't completely believe Daniel. Clara observed him from afar that night, hunched over a laptop in the closed-off staff cafe on Deck 5. He sat alone with one hand pressed to his temple, as though holding his thoughts in place. Flashing lines of code, encryption methods, file management windows. The softly glowing screen told him he was creating something. Alternatively, safeguarding something. Perhaps both. She had not inquired beyond the urgent what his strategy was. Every step seemed to take me deeper into a minefield. She came up silently and sat down without saying anything. At first, he ignored her. Then, they are not going to keep the agreement. He spoke quietly and without emotion. She gazed at him. You knew that when you created it. He replied, yes, but I didn't expect them to act this quickly. He rotated the screen in her direction. Recordings, pings of access, scripts from afar. They're attempting to track the dead drops, trace the upload sites back. They wish to catch the leaks before they become public. Clara shivered. So why wait? Why act to agree? Why act in agreement? Daniel remarked, to buy time. First, they have to find every node. And in the interim, they are observing me, watching us, track 7 years of sorrow. Her work background, her notes from treatment, her online queries. She came close to throwing up. Since you vanished, they've been watching me. Daniel's complexion was pale. I had no idea. She didn't trust him. They produced duplicates. All downloaded the logs, encrypted them, sent them to Daniel's fallback drive. Someone locked the door behind them though first. The intercom picked up a voice. Woman, peaceful, chilly. Daniel, you should have remained dead. Then the lights went out, flashing in unpredictable pulses. The emergency lights created long, skeletal shadows all across the control room. Clara momentarily lost sight of Daniel. Beyond the low mechanical grumble of the ship and the heavy, suffocating hum of her own breath, she could not hear anything. Her heart pounded against her ribs, as though attempting to flee her chest. The intercom's voice still rang in her ears, measured, distant, horrifying just because it wasn't furious. It was in control, and it recognized them. Then, Daniel's voice from across the room. Are you okay? Then from across the room, Daniel's voice. Are you okay? She discovered him hunched behind a metal console, face aglow with the slight blue of a backup monitor still operating on leftover power. In that light, he appeared different, less like a guy who had betrayed everything, and more like someone frantically trying to make sense of a world running without him. Clara agreed, but her lips were too parched to talk. They did not first attempt to open the door. Whoever locked it had a strategy, and neither of them wanted to start the next part of it blindly. Daniel's fingertips danced over the exposed ports under the console as he worked fast. Clara observed how his face tightened when he discovered the outgoing signal was being blocked. Trapped in that room with them, the data they had downloaded were merely another layer in the trap. It was not about preventing them from discovering the truth. It was about separating it. Daniel grumbled, "We're not getting anything out from here. They've looped internal surveillance and cut the primary transmission routes. From the ship's perspective, this room is vacant," Clara remarked. "So we're invisible. Ideal." Daniel's gaze darted to her. Not visible. Lure. The understanding sank like lead in her belly. They were not meant to leave that room. Perhaps the door would not open at all. Perhaps someone was already on their way with a cleanup crew, syringes and gloves, listening for footsteps, movement, or breath. Anything. She put her ear to the metal of the door. Quiet. Then she recalled something. The phone she owned. Though it possessed an audio recorder, thus far inside the ship it had no reception. Hands shaking, she took it out and pressed record. "Someone has to know what occurred," she whispered gently. "If we don't escape this place." Daniel gazed at her, something primal flashing over his face. It could have been guilt, perhaps sadness, perhaps he was once again grieving her. He said, "Stop. We're leaving." Clara stepped back from the entrance and looked around the room, cold and clinical. Racks of servers, hard lines going into the floor, ceiling panels fastened with security bolts. But she saw something the others most likely overlooked. The ground, a little irregular at the far corner, probably sealed decades ago when the ship was refitted, an ancient access panel scraped around the edges. Kneeling, she sensed the grooves. Daniel approached, crouched next to her, and started sliding his knife beneath the seam. Nearly 10 minutes later, the panel finally moved with a sigh of resistance. Underneath it, darkness, cables, ducts for maintenance, claustrophobic yet passable. Daniel fell first, his feet vanishing into the darkness. Clara came next, the room just large enough for their shoulders, and the atmosphere wet and metallic. She attempted to ignore the ship's weight pressing above them, tried not to picture water oozing in from unseen fractures. Guided by the distant buzz of the engines, they crawled left, then right for what seemed like an hour. Clara lost all sense of direction of time. Her knees throbbed, her throat ached. At last, though, they surfaced into an unattended, barely lit storage bay. They lived. Still the quiet dogged them. Too weary to talk, they sat with water bottles and stale protein bars in one of the concealed crew lounges Daniel had remembered from the blueprints. Clara sensed the change inside her, like a tectonic plate realigning under a metropolis, something shattering and reassembling. The man next to her was no longer her husband. That fantasy had collapsed, but she also didn't consider him a stranger. He was different now, a paradox she could not solve. A man who had loved her now harbored secrets that could destroy them both. At last Daniel spoke. "I know who she is." The sound. Clara spun around to face him. Who? From his pocket he took out a fading, black and white crumpled photograph. 3 individuals. Daniel was one of them, younger and neater. The other was a soldier dressed in military garb. Beside them, a lady with dark hair, smart eyes, and a quiet grin that fell short of the borders. Her name is Marla Ridge, ex-intelligence liaison. She helped design Orbioteca's shift to military uses. Excellent. Unforgiving. She knew all there was to know about everyone, including me. So she's aboard this ship, and she's on board this ship? Since I came back, she's been tracking me, playing a longer game, waiting for the appropriate moment to act. Clara let out a slow breath. What happens next? Should we look for her? Daniel declined. We bring her out. The strategy was dangerous, even careless. They had no other cards to play though. Daniel would act as though he were falling into the trap by uploading data from a phony site, leaking a traceable, unfinished version. They would transmit the message at a known blind spot in the ship's coverage, one Clara had overheard two engineers grumble about weeks before. Marla would bite if she were watching. She would come in person to stop it, and when she did, they would face her, not using arms, through exposure. Beyond the door, the space was quiet and opulently vacant, seating in white leather. A quiet hum from a champagne-stocked fridge. Clara entered after him. The door closed behind her like a vault. He pointed to a chair. She remained standing. She inquired, "What are you planning? Is this regarding the accident, the study?" He sat gently, elbows on his knees, leaning forward. His voice was quiet, devoid of its typical measured calm. "You recall the business I worked for prior to the crash?" Orbiotech, she agreed. Naturally, she recalled. She had despised that work for taking him away every night, and for forcing him to attend conferences that always seemed a little weird. "You claimed it was only logistics." He chuckled quietly. "It was, until it was no longer. Orbiotech had a DoD contract, research with dual uses. At first, I was unaware. Eventually, though, I began to see things I could not overlook. Orders sent via military addresses, data recorded under black code rules. I reported it, naively, thought someone would be concerned. That is when they approached me, suit-clad men, no titles. They claimed I would disappear should I wish to save you. They gave me a decision. Watch them destroy all I touched or vanish." Clara's throat was parched. "You faked your death then?" He agreed. "They set the crash up. I got yanked out before the aircraft left. The other passengers did not." That struck her like a punch. "You mean, they weren't meant to pass away? It was meant to be vacant, but last-minute events altered everything. They didn't mind. Collateral damage, simply to tidy the loose ends." Clara sat down roughly, her knees hardly supporting her. "You lived with that then?" "No," he responded softly. "I lived not at all." For a long period they sat quietly, faintly vibrating through the walls. The hum of the ship's engines. Clara gazed down at her hands. "What is on the drive then?" "Evidence," he stated. "Plans, messages, monikers, all they attempted to bury. And something even more terrible. They were developing a system for delivery. Not just a virus, something manageable, able to be used, designed specifically to target genetic markers." Clara raised her gaze gradually. "You mean bioweapons?" Daniel, or Elias, nodded. "They planned to put it to the test. That is why I ran." Overcome, she reclined. "What happens next? You let it go to the press. You believe a dead guy will convince anyone?" From his coat, he took out a little black box. Inside was a slick, humming satellite transmitter. "The second I link this, the files go live. Several servers, safe drops, reporters, researches. It will be impossible to bury once more." "Then why not?" He turned his gaze. "The second I do, they will know, and folks will perish. Not only me, everyone linked to me, including you." A lengthy quiet descended between them. She felt the ocean's weight pushing against the hull. For all its magnificence, the ship seemed little, delicate, as though under the weight of their burden, it may shatter. Clara then posed the question she had been avoiding since the time she last saw him. "Why return? Why this vessel?" He remained silent. "Initially not." Then he remarked, "Because there's someone on board I need to find. Someone who works for them. Not me. Still, they are present. They are observing." Her blood went cold. "You believe they will attempt to stop you?" "They already tried," he stated. 2 times. Clara recalled the slice breaks. The journalist discovered lifeless in the pool. She gazed at him, truly looked, and noticed the tension beneath his serenity, the way his fingers curled slightly toward the transmitter, as if expecting to require it at any second. "What then should we do?" He looked into her eyes. "We locate them first." They began that evening. Clara might go unobserved around staff areas collecting gossip and listening for anomalies. Most of his time was spent in the surveillance hub, where he accessed logs using a link he obviously shouldn't have. They worked together to compile a list of faces that didn't correspond to names, staff members not on the official manifest, and passengers with irregular boarding records. 3 names caught attention: a guy pretending to be a shipping executive, a woman who says she is an art broker, a third, someone traveling under a diplomatic passport with deleted clearance and no apparent function. Clara was particularly concerned about that one, the one without a name. She attempted to ignore the danger, tried to overlook the truth that if found digging like this, she would be dismissed at best, vanished at worst. But something in her would not give up. Perhaps it was loyalty, perhaps it was retribution, perhaps it was the intolerable desire to show she hadn't wasted 7 years mourning a ghost. On the second night, they trailed the shipping executive down to the lower deck. Using a key that circumvented normal locks, he entered a staff-only passageway. From a distance, Clara photographed the badge. It was cleared by the military. She wondered, what's down there? Daniel scowled. Storage, communication, generators for emergencies, and perhaps she mused something else. That night, they did not pursue him anymore. Clara, though, could sense the snare closing. The following morning, her access card failed. She attempted to access the crew lounge and received a red flash. Refused. Initially, she believed it to be a problem. Her supervisor, however, then called her aside, claimed someone had complained, claimed she was being moved, reduced visibility, less inquiries. They were on to her. Daniel as well. Someone was keeping an eye on him. Cameras shifted as he passed by. Passengers trying not to care spoke his name in quiet tones. The circle was tightening, one of the few remaining blind areas. They ran across each other in the washing room. Clara's voice was hardly a whisper. They're working against us. Daniel agreed. We then go more quickly. The ship held a masquerade that night. Wealthy guests wore gold masks, champagne running, a string quartet performing something that made Clara's skin crawl. It was the ideal diversion. They entered the communications room while others danced. Their discovery was more negative than anticipated. There were documents, not only of them, but of others as well. Guests raised red flags. Staff members noted. Photographs, notes, conversations recorded. It wasn't only monitoring. It was a profile. Intellect. Clara located her own file. Her skin crawling, she exited the room. 7th day. One more death. Floating face down in the ship's pool was one of its guests, an investigative journalist famed for revealing corporate wrongdoing. They claimed accident. Clara, though, noticed the woman's neck bruises. The storm had covered the murder. She started to doubt Daniel's solitude, that someone else was on board observing her, observing him. The question started to change from why did you fake your death, from what are you hiding? She broke into the surveillance records of the ship. Bit by bit, the truth came out. The crash had always been intentional. Daniel, Elias, had been part of a secret effort to steal something from a government initiative, one that spreads, a tool of destruction, something fatal. Staging the plane crash got rid of everyone engaged and closed off any remaining issues. Daniel, however, had lived, but now he was being chased. But why come back? Why at this time? Except if, unless he wasn't simply hiding, except he was plotting something. That night, Clara did not sleep. Sitting on the edge of her bunk, she gazed at the little USB device Daniel's suite had taken. Password protected, concealed in a drawer's fake bottom. She ran it through a broken decryption tool. What she discovered froze her blood. Plans, formulas of chemicals, coordinates. One word, bold red letters repeated. The tale is not finished. Now that Clara knows the truth, her spouse was not just gone. He returned to complete what he had begun. The ship is not only a boat, it's the platform for something larger. A disaster. She has 3 days remaining. 3 days to prevent him. 3 days to choose whether to preserve the planet or kill the guy still in possession of her heart. Knowing the reality, but not yet grasping it, was something intolerable. Clara's head was an echo chamber of voices, pictures, bits of talks she could hardly reconstruct, and she hadn't slept in almost 48 hours. Every time she shut her eyes, she saw him, Daniel Elias, whatever name he wore now, standing in the corridor, peering through her like a ghost who recalled too much. She had not been the same since the night she discovered the encrypted USB and watched the word release burn across the display. It was no longer only the treachery, it was the burden of whatever he had brought on board. She had no idea whether it was a metaphor, a strategy, a file, or a virus. But her instinct warned her something would occur before the ship docked again. Something unchangeable. And she was the only one aware of it. Wait, real talk. Imagine you're Clara right now. You mourned someone for 7 years, buried a closed casket, cried yourself to sleep, and now he's standing in front of you. Alive, hiding secrets. Maybe dangerous. Be honest, could you trust him again? Or would you walk away before your heart gets shattered a second time? Drop your answer in the comments. Seriously, I need to know what you'd do. And hey, if this story has you hooked, go ahead and like the video. It helps more people dive into this twisted mess with us. The cruise still had 3 days left for her in Marseille. 3 days to enter his universe. 3 days to choose whether she was ready to go beyond her past experience. She was not an investigator. She had not been prepared for this. She was a woman who had spent 7 years mourning a guy just to discover him alive and quiet, who had believed in promises. Sometimes all it takes is someone who is desperate enough not to worry about the repercussions when no one else is asking the correct questions. Her first action was to cease being subtle. Subtlety had led her nowhere. Her eyes sore from lack of sleep, her uniform drenched at the cuffs from spilled ice water earlier in the shift. She walked straight up to him in the corridor outside the private lounge. One hand held his phone, the thin black rectangle flashing softly. She noticed the shock in his expression before he covered it up. Though the walls were beige and benign, the quiet between them sliced like glass. I know what is on the drive. Though her hands did, her voice remained steady. He did not blink. Then you know enough to leave. She chuckled, brief and harsh. 7 years, Daniel. 7 years of funerals, therapists, dreams in which I believed I saw you among a throng and woke up sobbing. You really believe I'm going to go now? His eyes moved along the corridor. This is not the location. No, she responded, moving closer. But it could be your last opportunity to stop pretending. He didn't endanger her. He didn't take hold of her. He simply appeared worn out. Not guilty then. Unconcerned, exhausted in a manner she knew from the mirror. There was something worn at his edges, something time and remorse had degraded. Turning toward the door to the private deck, he tucked the phone into his jacket pocket. Come, he stated.
Clara should stay put, stay broken, stay buried, but she didn't, and neither did the girl in the next story. Her boss humiliated her in front of the CEO. What did she do next? With an incredible vengeance, she made him regret everything he'd done. She ruined his career, but it was only the beginning. You're not ready for this one. Click now, before the silent ones strike again. And if you like this story, leave a like and subscribe and comment what you think.